Good evening. It's Monday, August 21st, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and I hope you can hear me okay. And if you do, and you're watching this, I want to first of all thank you for stopping on by to the Knuckle Sandwich Podcast. Some of you out there may remember the first iteration of the Knuckle Sandwich Podcast, which was exactly that, a podcast themed about wrestling and mixed martial arts and some current events as well that circled around myself and two of my friends. Collectively, the show was called the Knuckle Sandwich Podcast with PB and J, which just is, quite honestly, the most perfect title that just we didn't even need to come up with it. It just kind of like came around ironically. In this case, I don't want to go so far as to call it the Knuckle Sandwich Podcast with PB and J, at least not yet, because then I need to talk to those guys and re-encourage them to get remotivated, and we can continue this show with the full 2/3-man team that you may remember. Nonetheless, I want to thank you for stopping by first and foremost. And in today's episode, and I'm going to try to keep it within a half hour because 8 o'clock is a miss, and I know a lot of you that are tuning in that are wrestling fans are obviously going to be trying to watch Monday Night Raw. And over the past month or so, from about early July on, I started making it public for those who know me personally, mentioning on Facebook. It's like, oh, the G1 Climax is starting. I cannot wait. I don't talk a whole lot about the goings-on of the sports entertainment world because, quite frankly, everybody watches that, or at least for the most part, a lot of people do. I'm one of few that doesn't necessarily follow it 100%. I don't find it as entertaining, but I do tune in when I can because there's a lot of guys that I have supported throughout the years that have now found their way in the WWE. So I'm always happy to check up with them and see how their careers are going and hope that their successes continue. Anyway, pertaining to the G1 Climax, the G1 Climax is a huge tournament that takes place during the summer, and I usually get fairly excited because they usually start announcing the participants in June, and the tournament takes place from about mid-July to mid-August. It's a lengthy tournament, obviously, and unlike most tournaments, example, the first tournament that you could think of as a wrestling fan would be either A, the previous iterations of the King of the Ring tournament that WWE used to hold, as well as their most recent Cruiserweight Classic and the debuting Mae Young Classic, which hits the WWE Network very soon. Those are all single elimination tournament formats. The G1 Climax is not that. The G1 Climax currently consists as a round-robin tournament with 20 participants broken up into two blocks, an A block and a B block, each block obviously having 10 participants. Over the course of 18 shows and then a final 19th, the 18 shows, each show consists of 5 tournament matches. So one show will focus on A block, the second show will focus on B block, and then continue that way, with the undercard of that show essentially being all various forms of tag team matches, whether it be straight-up tags, 6-man tags, 8-man tags, occasionally 10-man tags, featuring opponents that are scheduled to face each other in tournament competition on the following night. So basically, you get your tournament matches as the second half of the show, but the first half of the show is kind of a sneak preview of the next night's show. The purpose of the G1 Climax was originally started in the very early 90s by New Japan Pro Wrestling. It didn't always used to be known as the G1 Climax, but it became that in the early 90s, and it originally started as a single elimination tournament. The focus of the G1 Climax and why the G1 Climax is so important for New Japan Pro Wrestling is essentially, if you think of in terms of WWE, I'll relay it to in WWE terms. They always work towards WrestleMania at the very end of March / beginning of April. That road to WrestleMania usually starts in January, around the time of the Royal Rumble. When it comes to New Japan, their biggest show of the year currently is held on January 4th of the year, regardless of what day of the week it is. It's always has been held at the Tokyo Dome, one of the biggest arenas in Japan, which seats 50,000+ people. And the show is called Wrestle Kingdom. The 2018 version that will be taking place on January 4th of 2018 should be Wrestle King, I believe, is Wrestle Kingdom 12. And the purpose now of the G1 Climax, although it wasn't always that way, is that the G1 Climax, currently the winner of the tournament, gets a title shot against their champion, the IWGP World Heavyweight Champion, in the main event of Wrestle Kingdom. So now, being that the show takes place in January and the tournament takes place in July and August, that's a pretty lengthy gap between when the tournament ends and when Wrestle Kingdom is. Now, there's, again, a number of reasons as to why they do this. Whereas Wrestle Kingdom is the biggest show of the year, and then there's a lot of fallout that happens from Wrestle Kingdom in a few months following that. But there's a few tournaments that take place in between the G1 and the Wrestle Kingdom. Generally smaller tournaments. The first that comes to mind is the New Japan Cup, which is held in the springtime. That is a single elimination tournament. The winner of that gets a title shot. Then they have the heavyweight tag league, a junior tag league, and one of my other favorite tournaments, which is also a round robin, the Best of the Super Juniors tournament. But the G1 Climax is very special because that sets the tone for the second half of the year. And here's why. If we talk about the round robin league format, I mentioned that you have 10 competitors in the A block and 10 competitors in the B block. Usually the heavyweight champion also takes part in this tournament. In this particular case, Kazuchika Okada, the current IWGP heavyweight champion, was part of the B block. And other champions will take part in it as well. Example, Minoru Suzuki, the never openweight champion, was part of the B block. Kenny Omega, the IWGP United States champion, which is a new title, took part in the B block. Hiroshi Tanahashi, the IWGP Intercontinental champion, was in the A block. So there's a lot that's on the line in this tournament because if you were, example, to beat either the champion Okada or another champion in singles competition, which, to be quite honest, singles competition doesn't happen very much in New Japan either, but I'll get into that in a second. If you are able to beat someone who is a champion, there is a very high likelihood that after the tournament concludes later on down the road in September or October, you would ideally be first in line to get a shot at that competitor's title. Examples in the tournament. First night, actually, night number 1, Zack Sabre Jr. from the United Kingdom, who was also in the A block, defeated Hiroshi Tanahashi, who's the Intercontinental title holder, or at least for the time being. He beat him by submission on night 1. They also wrestled again much later in the tournament, at the very end, in a tag match of sorts, and Zack Sabre Jr. again defeated Hiroshi Tanahashi and then claimed his title shot, so to speak, by jumping him after the bell because he's a heel and taking the belt and kind of showing it and saying, hey, I want this, I'm next for it. And usually that's how it works. Someone comes by, takes out the champion, whether by legit or not so legit means, and claims their stake at the throne. And usually they end up being rewarded with a title match. Another example. On night 14, there was a couple of big upsets. Number 1, American competitor Juice Robinson beat Kenny Omega by surprise with a roll-up out of Omega's finisher and got the 1-2-3. Juice Robinson didn't have very many wins over the course of the tournament, but that was a big one. And because of that, he is being awarded with a United States title match in September. Likewise, in October, their next big event coming up in October is King of Pro Wrestling, and in that one, Evil will simple name, Evil, all caps by the way, will take on Kazuchika Okada for the IWGP Heavyweight Championship because Evil defeated Okada on that same night in one-on-one competition, cleanly, by the way. So he will be next in line for that title shot. Now, the winner of the tournament ended up being Tetsuya Naito, who was the winner of the A block and defeated Kenny Omega, who was the winner of the B block. They faced each other in a basically A block winner versus B block winner. Whomever had the most points would then face each other on night 19 in the main event with no time limit. And Naito ended up being the winner in what was a fantastic match. I highly recommend you go out and check that out if you can. So Naito gets the title shot at Okada, if Okada should be champion, of course, come Wrestle Kingdom 12. Now, Naito did not get away without any losses either. So because he was defeated previously at the hands of Tomohiro Ishii, both I think in the G1 and throughout the calendar year in two separate occasions, Naito has the right to defend his title shot. Basically, think of it as a Money in the Bank briefcase type situation, only it's for that match. It's a contracted match. You can't just claim it whenever you want. Naito will now defend that title shot against Tomohiro Ishii in October at that same King of Pro Wrestling show in what will likely be the co-main event of the evening. Likewise, Naito will likely have to look over his shoulder and again continue to defend that title shot against anybody else that he would have lost to over the course of the tournament. I think the only person that comes to mind, I was going to say, I actually was drawing a blank there for a second on who that was, but let's see. I'm pretty sure that Ishii defeated Naito, but Naito also had the most points. I think he might have only had the one loss, in which case it's pretty amazing, because you don't usually see a lot of guys win with just one loss, or especially no losses. Usually there's, two losses, sometimes three, and it literally boils down to tiebreakers to see who ends up doing that. Oh, see, I was close. Ishii, he did lose to Ishii, and his other loss was to Bad Luck Fale of the Bullet Club. So it's very likely that in November he will defend that title shot against Bad Luck Fale as well, and should he ward off those two potential threats, then he'll continue on to January 4th with his title match against Okada or whomever the champion may be. So that is essentially what the G1 Climax is destined to be. Now, the reason why I say it sets the tone as well for the rest of it has not all to do with just the title matches, too. I said earlier that there's not a lot of singles matches in New Japan. That is totally the case, with the exception of the big, let's call them pay-per-view matches, where there are single matches, ideally with titles on the line. Those are some of the very few times where there are singles matches. Most shows, like example, let's call it all the house shows that are going to take place coming up very soon. The Road to Destruction in the earlier half of September. I don't know what the hell that was. In the first half of September will lead up to the bigger Destruction shows. Now, pretty much those entire match cards, I think they are, all of the Road to Destruction shows that take place throughout Japan are all tag matches all night. Regular tags, 6-man tags, 8-man tags, and some of them, actually, the main events coming up are 10-man elimination tags, ideally between feuding factions. So in Japan, just as an example, the main few factions come to mind. Chaos is one, Bullet Club is another, Los Ingobernables de Japón is the third. Those are pretty much the big three. And then you have like what they call how dare I neglected to include Suzuki-gun, and I feel terrible about that now because Minoru Suzuki is one of my favorite wrestlers because he's an absolute asshole. So let's say those are the main four, and then you also have what they call the New Japan Army, so like the main roster who's unaffiliated with any particular factions. So just like, the Shinnigon-gun, I guess, if you want to call it. So those are the big groups, so you'll often see tag matches between factions and the like, and those are entirely what they do for the entire night. So you'll have 8 or 9 matches. All of them are tag matches, mostly because they have such a deep roster between the main talents they have, the mid-card talents, some of the, I don't want to use like a legends term, but some of the talent that are a little bit older, the Satoshi Kojimas, the Yuji Nagatas, the Manabu Nakanishis, the Hiroyoshi Tenzans, the guys that are up there who aren't really in the singles spotlight anymore. They all have those tag matches, and that's also an excellent place to highlight their young guns, the guys that are training at the New Japan Dojo, who are also all the stagehands and the ring crew. Like, it's really important when you're in there. You may occasionally have a match that you'll take part in. Usually, obviously, it's going to be a tag match of some kind where you're going to be tagging with more experienced guys, and ideally, you're going to be the guy going down and taking the fall, because that's just how it works. But it's an excellent time to showcase those young lions who will often go 2-3 years without a single win, let alone, getting featured and getting their own gear and stuff. It's really worth checking out to see what the whole young lion thing is all about. Now, what I was going to get to, again, I was talking about single matches not having a whole lot of focus. Usually when there are single matches, it's for titles. And usually those single matches are championship matches because a challenger beat a champion in a tag match of some kind, in some show leading up to that point. So that's where the rivalry starts. You happen to pin someone who's a champion. You usually say, hey, I just beat you in tag action or whatever. I'm coming for your title. I deserve the shot. Do you accept my request? Which usually it's always yes, right? And then it leads up to a big match of some kind. So the singles matches always have the highlight because they're also not as common. But with the G1 Climax, which is a round-robin tournament entirely focused on singles competition, that's the one big chunk out of the year where singles matches actually become the primary focus of the promotion for about a month straight. Which really, it's a big thing. It's a very grueling tour. They go all over Japan in a relatively short time frame, and these guys are having 15, 20-minute hard-hitting singles matches, all main event worthy matches in most cases, in a period of about 3 to 4 weeks. It's very enduring, it's very grueling, and it really takes a toll on the competitors, which you can tell why they don't do it all throughout the year. So that, in a nutshell, is a bit about how the G1 Climax operates. So the G1 Climax this year, G1 Climax 27, was home to quite a few big matches that took place. A couple things that come to mind. I talked about some of the upsets a little bit earlier. You can kind of tell when they release the schedule for, they let you know in advance, on this show, their two big matches are going to be, A faces B and C versus D. So those are the big matches that people are going to be looking for. And all the time, it's pretty much like, oh shit, I got to see that match. Like, I was excited about basically every main event on that whole tour. So I tried to cram in as much time as I could to get onto NewJapanWorld.com, which is a great subscription service if you want to check it out. I highly recommend you do that for the same $9.99 plus tax a month after conversion that you would be getting elsewhere from from Netflix or from the WWE Network or anything like that. It's definitely worth checking out to see if you think New Japan could be right for you. And if you don't like it, well, you can cancel it within a month. It's not a problem. You won't have to stick it out. But I definitely recommend going to check out some of these G1 Climax shows and perhaps some of the previous Wrestle Kingdoms too while you can. If you got the time, check it out. So I was very excited to see all these main events that were coming up, and I knew that every show was important. Every match was important because those 2 points that you get from a win and the 1 point you could get from a draw mean absolutely the world, and it's make or break, and it really shifts the focus towards the second half of the year. I think the two biggest matches that everybody was looking forward to, other than the finals match itself, was night 17 and night 18. Night 17 was the last night of the A block, and when you knew ahead of schedule that Tetsuya Naito was scheduled to take on Hiroshi Tanahashi, you kind of had a feeling that by that time they were going to be the two guys with the most points. That was absolutely the case, and Naito won in a real amazing contest over Tanahashi. Same thing goes for night 18, where after their first two matches, which both received over 5 stars from Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer, which is a pretty big deal. In their first encounter for the championship at Wrestle Kingdom 11, the last year G1 Climax 26 winner Kenny Omega challenged Okada for the IWGP title and was unsuccessful after about a 40 to 45 minute affair. They finally had their rematch for the title once again in June at Dominion, and for the first time in a long time, that match went to a 60-minute time limit draw. So everybody knew that this third match between the two, which was scheduled to take place on night 18, was going to be a big deal. Even more so during the tournament when you lead up into the points. Going into that match, Okada was ahead by 1 point after he had a 30-minute time limit draw a couple of nights earlier over with Minoru Suzuki. Omega was 1 point behind him. Therefore, in order to continue to the finals and hopefully get that title shot, Omega would have had to finally do the one thing he's been trying to do for nearly a year, and that's beat Okada, and this time he had to do it in under 30 minutes. Which he was able to do finally. Beat Okada, get that chip off his shoulder, put it out in about between 20 and 25 minutes, and get the big win that he sought after. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, he went on to the finals the following night against Naito, and Naito managed to get the win. So there are other big matches that took place and really memorable matches, some funnier than others, as a matter of fact. A couple things that I remember is notable cheater Toru Yano and Kenny Omega had an interesting, very entertaining match early in the tournament where Yano kept trying to cheat Omega out of a win, so much so that he took medical tape and taped Omega's feet together and tried to keep him out of the ring for a 20 count. Omega managed to beat the 20 count, turn the tables on Yano, tied his feet up with medical tape, and they spent the last little bit of the match pretty much hopping around the ring, which was pretty funny. Headlock included, off the ropes, hopping back and forth. It was funny. Speaking of which, Yano also got a win over Minoru Suzuki after cheating him with a low blow and a roll-up from behind, which was pretty crazy. He then paid for it horribly after Suzuki beat the ever-loving shit out of him. But anyway, I don't want to drag on too much, but I wanted to summarize what the G1 Climax is. Now, because of what took place in the G1 Climax, now you have a bunch of other title matches that are going to take place due to what occurred over that 3 to 4 week span that are going to take place in September and October. So, much like I mentioned that there was some upsets, those now lead to title matches. So Juice Robinson is going to challenge Kenny Omega for the United States Championship. Zack Sabre Jr. will challenge Hiroshi Tanahashi for the Intercontinental Championship. Obviously, Evil will challenge Okada for the IWGP Heavyweight Championship in October, and Ishii will challenge Naito first for his Wrestle Kingdom title shot in October as well. In addition to that, there are a series, actually, 3 separate 3-way matches for the IWGP Heavyweight Tag titles, as the champions of War Machine, Hansen and Rowe from Ring of Honor, some may know those names, are going to defend the titles against former champions Gorillas of Destiny, which is Tamatanga and Tongaloa brothers from the Bullet Club, and the returning team of Davey Boy Smith Jr., a.k.a. Harry Smith, and Lance Archer, collectively known as the Killer Elite Squad. Those 3-way matches will take place at 3 shows in September. So that title may change hands 3 times. Also, the junior tag titles are going to be on the line during September as well. The new champions, Ryosuke Taguchi and Ricochet, who won the titles at the finals of the G1 Climax, will defend those titles against the team of Suzuki-Gun's Taichi and Yoshinobu Kanemaru. Kushida will also defend the IWGP Junior Heavyweight title in singles competition against El Desperado, the man who's been trying to steal the belt from him, literally and figuratively. And let's see. Oh, yes, I also mentioned the never open weight title will be defended too. Minoru Suzuki is going to defend against Michael Elgin, one of the men that beat him over the course of the G1 Climax. And lastly, also the six-man tag titles. The never open weight six-man tag titles are going to be defended as, I believe it's LIJ of Sonata, Bushi, and Evil will defend their six-man titles against, I believe it was the team. Oh, yes, it was Team of Chaos. So it was Okada, Yano, and Rocky Romero, who was doing a lot of commentary for the last 3 days of G1. I always like Rocky Romero on commentary. I always find it to be really entertaining. Anyway, so that is the summation of how the G1 Climax works and how that translates into New Japan programming going forward. I hope that cleared things up a little bit for you and hopefully didn't throw too much information at you. Anyway, it's getting close to 8 o'clock. I know some of you guys are going to settle in to watch Monday Night Raw. If you've taken the time to kind of pop in and check this out, I appreciate it. If you happen to catch this later on at another time, I appreciate it as well. And I will see you guys next time. Have a good evening.